Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock. And I say it all the time, but I'm always smiling so big. I have a happy heart because I have these great conversations. I swear we've just had a 10-minute conversation. I said, we need to do a podcast guest or episode just about what we were talking about. So
That's great.
today I am welcoming Anna Rahe, and she is fascia-based movement coach who, spanning her 25 plus year career, has helped 10,000 plus people, including celebrities like Robert Downey Jr., blah, 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 which my daughter would be like, oh my gosh, Iron Man.
We love
Uh,
that guy.
increase awareness and address their body's needs to improve mental and physical health using fascia. So welcome, Anna.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. It's really fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I even had to ask you how to pronounce it because I've done a little bit of fascia work, but
Yeah, have
I
you? Yeah.
I want to learn more, especially about the trauma piece of it and like how trauma is stored in our bodies, right? I've talked about it so much on the show. Can you just give us like an intro? What is fascia and
Yeah,
the work you do with it?
totally. I just did a speaking engagement at my kids' school, and I was like, I have to dumb this down for a, first and fourth grader. And so I'm like, how do you do this? So I am going to give you that version because sometimes I love to get into the science of it, and most people are like, blah, 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 what? So fascia is a type of body tissue inside of you, and it looks like under your skin. If you open it up, it looks kind of like a gel, delicate gel spider web all the way through you. And so I told the kids that the fascia is kind of like your superhero suit, and it's woven like Spider-Man, but it functions like Iron Man. And they were
Nice.
like, "Oh, I love that." And so fascia organizes this entire like body system, just like your digestive system, just like your endocrine system, just like your vascular system. The fascia organizes the connective tissue system. And this body system comes complete with its own set of organs, the way that fascia organizes around other body structures and other body systems. And so it's deeply venerated into all of your physiological functions. And so when we look at it, it has really a lot of significance in our physicality and our physical body, but it also affects our kind of mind and our psychology, the way it's wired to our nervous system. And it becomes a primary way of interfacing with ourselves to try to have health and wellness.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I was on your Instagram page and I saw one of your posts was like explaining fascia to um
My students.
to kids. Yeah. And I was like,
It's
yeah,
really fascinating, and it was a great challenge. I love it. I'd like to write a children's book someday, but
that's awesome. Do it. Yeah. I think that and I love the way you explained it because it makes so much sense. So I know, like for me, I know trauma was like super stored in my body for way too long. Did a lot of healing work. And, again, just some not really deep into fascia work, but anything that was coming across my radar, I was like, ooh, gotta
hungry
try.
for. Yeah, I want to heal.
Yeah,
Once you taste
exactly.
healing, you don't want to give it up. It's
Right,
a very
right.
beautiful process.
So now is fascia something, my understanding, is that something sometimes I confuse lymph and fascia. Is fascia something like you have to physically move, or is it something people can do to move it
Wow.
themselves?
Great question. So, fascia is an animate tissue structure, meaning it contains contractile cells. Contractile cells just mean that they like kind of contract like a muscle, except they're not as strong as a muscle. Their contractile cells have like one, you know, gigahertz versus 10 gigahertz or whatever. It's a very subtle kind of contraction. But what's really cool is that you can control this contraction. And this contraction happens as part of its greatest facility. So I didn't go over this, but when you start looking at your superhero suit, you want to look at what are the functions. And if you climb inside Iron Man's suit, it's got like this sensory, and it perceives how high you are and how deep you are and how wide. And it also like can, give you power and fuels you to fly. And so you have the myofascia, which is the organ, the fascial organ of the muscular skeletal system. Then you have an endocrine organ of fascia that actually works with your hormones. And so when you start looking at all of its different facilities of your suit, it literally, in its greatest capacity, is an energy modulator. It's a communication system, it's a movement system, it's a neurological system, it's a sensory organ, the way that it collects information, and that'll affect our conversation on kind of trauma and how it goes in there. But The general sense is that it is taking high frequency loads from outside. We call them mechanical loads, like when you're lifting and pushing and pulling and working out and carrying your dog and trying to do all this stuff. And it takes the more subtle physiological loads of your hormones and your chemicals and your cellular output. And it's busy connecting and combining this electrical input into a hydroelectric mechanism, right? So it's like that's the reason your lungs sit next to your heart and there's no like conflict between the energetic output of it, right? You have the EKG that puts it out an electrical, and then your lungs are expanding, and fascia's behind the scenes, like doing this beautiful dance of modulation, peaking things up, putting things down. And so when we start looking at influence of what is like how fascia is responding, this suit is like super high tech, and it has like almost like this like uh quantum, I don't like that word. It's not quantum. It's like this I have to be careful with my words because I just had this long conversation on another one. I'm like, we mix too much with quantum field and other things. It's a high it's a high Wi-Fi signal. It's a communication system that's like digital and can like talk and speak and everything. And so it's busy communicating with your nervous system, regulating. They talk a lot about how the fascia is the organ of consciousness to the body, the way that the brain is the organ of consciousness to the mind. And they are deeply venerated or deeply connected in their communication styles. And so what you start looking at is that fascia's got these sensors, more sensors than anything. And for a listener, a sensor is just like kind of like a radio antenna, and it's listening out for different kinds of sensory experiences. They can be mechanical, like I'm being touched. They can be heat. They can be chemical receptors, where they're reading what you've eaten and what you're ingesting and what's your environment around you. You have receptors that are nosy, and they're the ones that we'll talk about in a minute about trauma, in terms of telling your body that there's too much of something, that there's toxic levels of stuff in your body. And so your organ of consciousness is collecting all this data about your life, and it's trying to process it, and it sends it to the brain to code it and then to like make, organization of that information. And so it's two-way street of communication. The problem is that a lot in terms of general health is that we're really disconnected from our bodies. We love our, digital brain. It processes. We love tech, and everything happens from above the shoulders until you get into the deep, deep therapies of your body, and you're like, oh, man, I'm missing some information. I can analyze myself to death, but there's vital information to my healing and my wholeness that I'm missing information from. And that's where fascia becomes really powerful as a source to contribute to your healing. It has information that cannot be contained through memory and through, cognitive access. You have to be able to access it through physical manipulation and mechanical reloading to extract those memories and those ideas and feelings from it, the somatic.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said the word somatic, because that was just popping into my head, like doing that somatic, where are you feeling it in your body kind of thing. And yeah,
Soma means body, and somatic just means for the happenings of the inside of your body. And then when you move out into space, and that's where most of us are always distracted. So we're in the kinesphere, which is like anywhere you can touch. It's like this very baseline, immediate access. And so we're constantly needing to use our senses and our cognition to jump between those places, right? The space inside of you, inside the somatic space, or inside the kinetic space. And when you can work those and respect them evenly or holistically, let's say holistically instead of a number, then all of a sudden you get a lot of balance. So there's this concept that's interesting to fascia, and I think it applies to healthy existence. It's called biotensegrity. And instead of us, we live very much in the thought of health and wellness, whether it's in our bodies or in our brains. We think a lot about like balance and having good homeostasis. But fascia brings this kind of new lens in, talking about biotensegrity, which is basically life tension and the symmetry, the balance of tensions in who we are and in our bodies and how it works. And so fascia is based upon its structural components, is based upon keeping tensemetry that's in the tissues and tensegrity in the architecture. And this is what I really love about like its fascia's application to kind of what you're doing and offering healing to people, is that healing is not a place of perfection or a place of rest or a place of arrival. It's saying I get really, really healthy. The healthier I am, the more I can manage my tensions. They don't go away. You just get more agile at being able to work with the dynamic tensions that are coming into you. And I love this quote as a book that I was just recently reading, and it says, stress is not the killer. It's how we handle the stress that kills us. And I'm like, this is so true that stress actually breeds great strength. Our struggles build, our trauma builds great fortitude. It actually builds who we are. When you get to the other side, you don't regret going through your trauma. You're like, that was the best thing that happened to me because I am now victorious. I am not a victim. But what that requires is going into the dark shadows of tension. And we don't like to do that. It scares us. It hurts. A lot of times it's accompanied by pain, either physical pain or emotional pain. And so I think that fascia is this integrative body system that's kind of on the forefront of asking us to think differently, both about our physical health, but also our psychological health and how we're going to handle our traumas past, our current struggles, and how we can use those same biomechanics into creating a better life for ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. So brilliant. Like so much. I was like, you saw me. Yes, shaking my head. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
It's
Well,
fun
and I
because
have to,
particular language is different. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I have to say that, so, and I've talked about this over the past few years, and I'm going to lead to a question in just one second. So,
I want to hear.
horrible trauma history through my first 22 years of life, from bank robberies and murders and sexual abuse and physical abuse and alcoholic parent. I mean, like, just a lot. And
Sure.
so I did a tremendous amount of healing work, 4 years of EMDR, I did some somatic work, did tapping, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but there's a couple things that I haven't been able to shake, right? And so when you just said earlier about, like, sometimes, you know, fascia, it can be used to get to those things that we just can't seem to, like, they've been stored away, but is it just like it's like so stored so deep or somewhere where we just can't
Yes. And it's
really
wrapped
get
around
to
our
it?
patterns. That's right. It's wrapped around our patterns, right? So oftentimes I find that even somatic disciplines are kind of are superficial. And I don't mean that in a criticism way. I mean that my own journey is from trauma to victorious, from, pain to healing. And so I love your podcast for that reason. So I had to do a lot of different analysis because my pain was stuck. And the things that I wanted, like I would get these treatments and I would go to deep psychotherapy. I would do every kind of like meditation and I would like you talk about hunger for health. It was like, I just want to be whole. I just want to be healed. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that that's a really important thing is that oftentimes we're still tapping in, then dealing with the substance of who we are. And fascia, when it is actually imprinted, is multiple layered. So if you're touching your skin, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're into the greatest depth. Oftentimes, a lot of fascia stuff is with the energetics of how energy is moving through the fibers, where the actual trauma is stuck in the layers. And so you have to kind of picture fascia is deeply layered. These organs that I was talking about is not really like a massed organ like your heart. It literally is like kind of the sediment layer that dives through and wraps around like saran wrap almost. So that the same layer that's up here in your pec might be coming through your bladder down in the lower hemisphere and wrapping around it. So when you want to unleash trauma and when you want to loosen it, you literally have to go in and remodel the actual fibers of fascia, the way fascia is holding you, the way that fascia is wrapped around you and through you. And so these things are more like a lot of the MDR and stuff that I understand. I'm not an expert, but it's a lot more like working with the nervous system, which is really great. But what you're kind of talking about is I still need to deal with the clay of my statue. I still need to deal with the tissue that I'm living in and the way fascia imprints into the body, both on a conscious and subconscious level, is happening kind of, it looks like rings on a tree, right? So you actually need to go into where this, tree was drought, but you have to look at that from the layer it exists inside your tissues. So it may not be accessible through just your touch or someone holding space over you or the energetics. You have to deal with the actual like flesh and let it go from the flesh. And that's what I find most people I don't think that the opportunity exists. They would like to, but I think that it's not super readily available, right? It's usually practitioner on you versus like, dude, I'm like torquing myself, and then I collapse into a heap of tears and I don't know why, you know. So I think that's what you're talking about is
Yes.
the difference between, that permanent change. And that was part of my story. I just didn't want to always be managing my pain in my body, my health problems, or my psychological issues that all stemmed from my trauma. I have some really severe childhood sexual abuse, ritual abuse. And I was like, it only came, my body started speaking the moment that my head was clear on it. It was amazing. I never felt anything in my body before until I had this memory. It came through me, and then within 1 month, I was just crippled physically. And so I realized that most of our journeys work from the head up, right? Our Freudian and Jungian like psychology is not embodied psychology. It's psychology. So I call it somacology, where you actually have the right tension between the somatic and the psychology, the psychic, and you bring it together. And that's where those major just remaining shifts need to happen, right? The body must speak in order to be healed.
Yeah. And I loved what you said earlier, and everything you're saying is just, again, so brilliant, so resonating. But how, and what I went out of my head, but I wanted to say, so like with oh, what you were talking about when you get through your traumas and you're like, oh, like that was such a gift. I now look at so much that I've been through as such a gift because it's just helped elevate me along this journey, right? Whether my spiritual journey, my physical healing, whatever it is. But I did all that healing work, moved into this house in Hilton Head, unbeknownst to us, it had been condemned for toxic mold. And
Oh
so,
gosh.
canary in the coal mine, because I had been living in such a state of hyper arousal for so long, I
Yeah,
didn't know
right.
my immune system was weakened. And so I ended up getting like this horrible rash. And so it's still hanging on. Can physical symptoms, is that something that fascia is related to?
Deeply, fascia is deeply venerated. The word veneration sometimes there is that it's wrapped around and works tightly knitted with your immune system. And there's just, yeah, yeah. That it's been now linked to autoimmune issues from a physical level. It's been linked to cancers. It's literally this because it's operating. It's what's creating a lot of your pH balance. There's a thing called the fascia microbiome. And so when you have a constant stressor, you're constantly in a state of like, and I don't know all the biochemistry, so I won't pretend, but there's this state of like where cells are proliferating and trying to deal with the inflammation, and it creates this sense of distress. And if it's not actually calmed, if it's not released, then adding additional toxics is like most people don't have allergies to one thing. They have allergies to the 16th thing that's coming in. And that's what you're talking about. Is your body probably lived at a heightened state of immune response of this kind of like, I think they're called cytokines, but I'll get the language at some point. And so it like keeps you up at this level. And then you add one additional thing and the body's like, can't. And that usually
That's what it
shows up
was.
in our tissues. And that's very much fascia related.
Yeah, wow. No, it was like I've never had an allergy before in my life, and I still don't. It wasn't a mold allergy, it was a
Yeah. Yeah.
mycotoxin
That's
response,
correct.
and it was histamine, and my bucket overflowed. Like
Road. That's right.
my my
Interesting.
body said, "Nope, we're done."
It
Yeah,
is the craziest thing. Did you do a detox?
I
Mold
did.
is
Yeah.
really tricky too. And did it help?
Oh, tremendously. Like everything got better. I had so many things going wrong with me. Like, I mean, I had lost 58 pounds. My throat was
Oh,
closing up from when I would eat, from histamine intolerance. Like just a lot was happening.
wow.
Resolved all of it except this autoimmune, this autoimmune,
Yeah.
and which is the rash on the skin. And had it biopsied and said it was psoriasis. So yes, an autoimmune response, but mycotoxins can
Yeah.
trigger that
That,
response. And so I'm just always love learning. I'm fascinated, and fascia's
yeah.
come up on more than one occasion for me. And so I really need to listen to this and be like, oh,
So I
Teri,
think so. And there's a couple like there's different ways to actually address this stuff. And I like fascia and stuff because it's so practical. It's like on the physical level, and then it will have physical responses. But like things like in chronic states of stress, your diaphragm and your adrenals become like almost ossified, where they become hypertonic, and then the actual tissue becomes unhealthy and rigid. And so oftentimes we never actually deal with the state of the tissue that's surrounding the organ. So the organ keeps secreting because it's the chemical cocktail, but the tissues around it are restrictive. And so it pools. Think about like having a really tightly knit strainer, and those chemicals don't actually spread out and get to metabolize through your body, so they will hold. And that's where the point of inflammation is. So you can actually go in. That's kind of what osteopathic medicine does, is goes in and looks at organ motility and tries to restore the high functioning of this animating tissue so that things will off center. So you're like, or offload from the center of where the epicenter of inflammation is occurring. And those kind of things can really help to start calming the system, making sure that the adrenals don't get hypertonic and constantly, secreting. So there's a lot of different ways to go in. You can obviously do it through diet, but a lot of this and what I'm learning is intrinsic care of the body and of the tissues. And it's like, how well is your body producing its own water? And how is that water being distributed? There's a thing called fluid shift with fascia. And it's literally like the kinds of movements that we do displaces the water inside of us and is our internal washing, because fascia is organized in tubes and it's 70% water. And so when you start looking at this, is what I talk a lot about with people, but if you want to talk about physical care to have influence over autonomic processes, fascia is that key in. So you're talking about, I'm having, my body's responding even though I'm not, taking in toxins. And so you have to go and be like, how can I have an autonomic influence? And that's fascia. And so when you start taking care of fascia, you can, autonomic for the listener is automatic systems. Like, thank God that we were not put in charge of our heart beating. That'd be really problematic, right? You'd forget to think about it, and or we would overtake in oxygen and our lungs would expire, and, all these kinds of things. So there's autonomic functions that keep a baseline for existence. And most of us like think that the only ways to influence our health is through diet and exercise. But fascia is like, whoa, 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 there's a big way. And so what I tell people is that if you understand that fascia is this fluid system that's constantly working to move internal water through the aqueducts of its systems, inside of you, you will actually change pH levels, you will change toxification levels, you will change lymphatics, you will cycle different kinds of fluids inside the body by how you address fascia. And this becomes paramount because if you think about all the things that we do to move our water, it's mostly fitness, and our fitness is really based upon solid mechanics. Solid mechanics means I have a stick and which is my bone, and I've got muscles, and they pulley system my sticks around, and this is how I move. But fascia comes in and says that's not actually accurate. I am tubes, not sticks, and I am water, not a solid. And therefore, I move more like a plunger, like a hydraulic system, than I do pulleys and levers. And so when you want to start changing inflammation in your body, you have to move certain ways. You have to actually move the water to displace the overproduction. I think they're called cytokines. I don't know why, but I think those are the like things that stimulate the immune response to produce,
I've
histamine
read that. Yes.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we want to affect that. And so that's why I like starting with the body, because really the body has two roads for healing. One is like strictly physiological, and the other one is 100% psychological. And you can do powerful work with both and sharing a similar biomechanics, right? Like I read on one of your posts on Instagram that was really beautiful. It's like, I learned, oh no, it was your website. It said, I learned through you how to flow through life or something like this. And I was like, this is essentially the new model for our psychology. Like, how do we metabolize emotions, whether they're momentary trauma, whether they are residual years of, layered, sediment inside of ourselves? And how do we bring these tensions out and create flow? And that's what fascia wants. Like from the like purely physical level of moving water to the way we psychologically load it. Because I tell people this sometimes, people often ask, like, how does, trauma get stored in the body?
Yeah.
And there's a couple different through lines of fascial science that apply but don't necessarily explain. And the best way that I can take those and explain it to the layman is this, is that your body creates a hormone cocktail. I call it a cocktail of experience. Very much like you order a drink at the bar. It's like 2 shots of cortisol, 3 shots of adrenaline, some 6 things of serotonin and some vermouth, and you shake it up and it sends it through your tissues. It's like, this is first love. And you're like, oh, and your butt and your tissue contracts and holds you, and you get a pit in your stomach and you get your throat to, and you order that cocktail. And we don't really think about how many cocktails we're ordering throughout our day. It's just happening, right, in our physiology. But most people have personalities that regularly order like cocktails. And when trauma is regularly occurring in your life, it can either give you small doses, or if it's like one large event, it's a huge toxic, download. But the fascia is on the back end contracting and trying to like move that chemical through your low back, through your pelvis, and it's imprinting all the way through its own system into your muscles, into your bones, and it's how we behave. So when you go back and you want to heal from some of these things, you go into the ways that those are patterned. And there's this chart called emotional anatomy that kind of lays out how the body has, primary, influences of imprint. And that's how you can start looking and being like, oh, our right side represents this. It's often governed by this part of the brain. And so as you break down and look for patterns, you can really see these emotional cocktails of experience that load the way that our mechanical load is happening into our system. And one of the greatest strengths for undoing trauma or healing, or even just getting really good at like handling life, is learning how to use biomechanics. We don't apply it to the way we live life, but it's like life mechanics. How do we use those to not keep these stresses and these strains in us and free ourselves into flow, which is what that whole, it's inspiring when you say, yeah, like we want to flow in our lives. We want to not be sunk by the things that affect us and imprisoned and restricted, because that creates toxicity. And that's not metaphorical. It really does create toxicity in your tissues.
Yeah. It's hilarious. So I found out I'm not as limber as I thought I was because today I lifted my pant leg and my legs look like my skin's looking so much better. I've been doing some stuff and I was like, I said, "Oh my God, you look so good." It's like petting my calf. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh." And I tried to
Girl,
kiss my
yeah.
leg and I was like, I cannot reach that part. It's like, I cannot bend
Maybe I
like
should.
that.
That's really funny. It sneaks up on you as you age. I'm still like, I thought I was going to get to a point through my 30s and be like, I am so limber. I just feel so like nothing. And now I'm like, now I'm 47. I'm like, yeah, I have to do GST every day to stay feeling really good.
I love it. I love it. So now, the way you work with people, can you work with people? They have to be physically present with you, or can you
No,
work with
no.
folks anywhere?
I work with people any and everywhere, because I think that was actually one of the blessings of COVID for me, is that for a long time I thought, oh, my hands have to be on them and I have to, and well, we didn't have the option, did we? So when you
Right.
don't have options, it's the breeding ground for opportunity, I like to say. So I think that it's really fun actually to be able to work with people. I work with people internationally in Sweden and Italy, and then I also work with people down the street if they don't want to come in. It's always a little bit more potent, right? Like there's something about human connection that makes a healthy individual, the way that there's, the connections of fascia determine how healthy your body is. And so there's this nice, beautiful mirror, and I would love to have my hands on everybody. I love touching people. My daughter the other day, she said, "You really like touching people, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." She's like, "I'll do your job when she's only 9. She's like, "I'll do your job as long as I don't have to touch people." I was like, "Okay, that's fine." There's something about just there's something sacred, I think, about being in presence with someone. And I don't think it requires hands-on, but being present with someone and the gift of touch, is a love language, is a way of being able to show up. And I do like working with people. So sometimes people will fly in and see me as well, so they can get those benefits.
That's so cool. Where are you? You're in
Yeah.
California?
Colorado. No, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I
Oh,
was in
you're in Boulder,
California and I
Colorado.
moved back.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah,
My oldest son lived in
it
Denver for
is.
6 years. Yeah.
Oh, why did he move?
He just returned back to Cincinnati to family and yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah. The magnet family is a strong
Yes.
one. That's really important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But man,
Are
we
we
went
having
out
a
to
delay?
visit him. So, so pretty out there. So I think we're having a delay. Sorry if I'm talking over you.
We are. Nope, you're not talking over me, but I don't know how that ends up looking in our in the editing of the podcast. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, no, no. It's all good. Well, I mean, the audio part of it'll be just fine. I'll edit out any glitches, but video will be fine. So, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Awesome.
I thought it might have been mine, but I have four things, so I don't know what the
Yeah.
problem.
Well, I could sit and talk to you. Like you're so I don't even like I keep saying brilliant, but like it's just there's so much oh gosh, I can't even think of the word. Like just so much incredible information here that is just resonating with me personally. But I always love to learn and I
I
just sit
love
here
that
like a
about you.
sponge.
I love that so much. I think I share that heart with you is that I mean that's why after 25 years you just collect a lot and then I think one of my superhero skills is putting the connections together, right? Because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a thing, but I was a desperate woman. Girl, I was 18 when all this started happening and I
Oh,
just wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be whole. I wanted to not have depression. I wanted to not have pain in my body and gastrointestinal problems and breathing problems and brain fog and blah, blah, blah. So, desperation is a beautiful thing also, right? It's hard when you're in the center of it. But I think that tends to be what I love most is how um, everything's connected if you look for the through line, if you look for the messaging in that for people. I think that's a good key to journeying, which is what healing is, right? It's this journey, not a destination.
yeah.
So thanks. I appreciate you seeing me.
Yeah.
I I really like sharing things, but I also love learning. It's so good.
Yeah, me too. And I think I've said it before on the show, but I'm gonna say it again. I just think some of the most incredibly empowering people in this world are those who have turned their pain into purpose. And so
I
it
love
just
that.
it just resonates from you and it's wonderful because I know for me that it's just authenticity, right? Like you've lived it and now you're here to reach your hand back into that darkness for anyone who's struggling. And so yeah, it's just beautiful. Thank you.
I like how you show up, though. I think your authenticity is really palpable. And it's something that I think we were talking about this before the camera or before the recording went on, but just like showing up as who you are. First, you discover who you are, right? First, you're trying to put together broken pieces. And then you're like, I actually oftentimes talked about people when I'm working with them in a one-to-one, I'll be like, healing is like an archaeological dig. And the first step, it happens in three steps. The first part is excavation. And that's when you go digging in the dirt and the hard, calloused soil, and you just dig into muck and mire. And then you're tedious and it's painful, and you get cut, and it's hot, and the sun, and everything is just hateful about it. And you don't think you're getting anything. You end up with this little section, and this little piece of plate, and this little part of jewel, and this little but then after a little bit, you're like, okay, I've collected my artifacts. And then the next one, actually you do extraction or excavation, you do the identification. And now you go in and you're like, okay, this piece looks kind of like this piece, and they kind of go together. And I can see that brokenness is caused by this brokenness. And you start to piece together the actual artifact, right? And then step three is when you kind of restore it, restorative, and you're like, do I want to use this vase? I see this vase of sexual abuse. Does it serve me anymore? Or I see the way that I have been crumpled and controlled by this trauma. This is my, trophy of survival. And you're like, this actually has value. I'm going to put it back on my shelf to remind me it is the thing that builds compassion in the journey. It's what connects me to another person. And in that last stage is really where you start to free yourself and see the actual beautifulness of the relic, where it's no longer dug into you and creating pain and trauma. It's actually freed you to be able to be of service. It has a purpose, it has a plan. And I think that that is like the journey that kind of helps to I want to say explain it, because I think sometimes I got lost in the weeds. When you're on a journey, sometimes you're like, how long is this part going to last? When can I just stop behaving like this? Or I don't want to be triggered by this, or I'm so fucking tired of being
Yes.
this. And so you're like, oh my God, this is so annoying. When is it going to change? And one of the things I love about fascia is that it really talks about microdosing, tensions, microdosing healing. Like we always look for big jumps in change, big jumps in healing, big jumps, 30-day challenges. I'm going to be totally 50 pounds lighter in 2 weeks. I'm like, everything happens in this microwave era rather than being like, just get down and start going into your dirt and then start putting these beautiful pieces together. And if you just get buried in the like, process, you'll start to be at the end and you'll be like, wow, wow, I did it. This is great. And then you have all the tools to continue to live life past the archaeological trauma of it, right? Trauma is supposed to be terminal. Trauma does not follow you forever. The happy side of healing is that there is a definitive point where you're like, I am not controlled by this anymore. I step away from and into the sunrise, away from the trauma. And in that moment is when you really start to be like, I still need to live amongst the struggle and the thorns, but I'm not carrying the burden of my trauma. I am now lighter. I am more capable. I am more, available to others, right? I always tell people the whole point of healing is to get over yourself. And it's really hard to stomach when you're at the beginning. When you're just digging out your shit, it's like, ah, I can't get over
Yes.
myself. I can't get over myself. I'm so sick of myself. And then pretty soon you're like, here's my vase. I'm just going to put it up there and go to have cocktail hour with my friends because
Yes.
I'm going to go help the person on the street because I'm really over myself. And I think that is truly the gift of healing is when you can be of service to others, where it
Yeah.
doesn't control you anymore and held you
Yeah.
captive
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, again, I could sit here and talk to you. Well, actually, just like
forever. I know. Thanks for letting me
teach
talk.
me more because
I
it's
love
so
chatting.
amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you for the work you're doing.
I certainly want to leave you with an opportunity to leave folks with any final thoughts or anything that you wanted to touch upon.
I think that was it. You let me talk a lot and I appreciate it. I hope I didn't overtalk your
No,
ear off.
I
I really am passionate about this and I want people to, I don't know that there's hope, know that there's a really actual simple process. I think when I was stuck in therapy for 34 years, I was like, oh my gosh, does it have to be this long? And there's not a timer, there's not a timer on life, but I think that there's a nice to like put an effervescence to it and be like, yeah, can I find my humor inside of my struggle and stuff? So thank you for letting me share what you're offering to the world is great. And if people want to come find me, I'm at Anna Rahe. I spell my name a weird way. It's Rahe, AnnaRahe.com. And my company is called GST Body, GST. We don't even go into that. It's just GST. So remember it, and you'll put it in the show notes.
yeah,
But I
yeah, for
would,
sure.
yeah. And if you guys write to me, I am always answering first person, real time. There's no automation or robots. I really care about the person who's living inside of you and want to be part of that journey of healing.
Wonderful. Well, again, it's just been such a pleasure. I've learned so much. Thank you for the work. Thank you for being here and shining your light. It's beautiful.
Thank you for having me, Terry. It's such a gift.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself.
Hmm.
Thanks. Bye bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock here. Just wanted to thank you again for being a part of this healing space and my hashtag hope for healing journey. Thank you for sharing, liking, inviting others to join, listening in. You've really helped this show blossom. It has now been downloaded in 136 countries and is in the top 2% globally out of 3.2 million shows, which is just amazing. And it's all because of you and your tuning in and inviting others and sharing and liking and loving. And your reviews on Apple really help too. My goal is to hit 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. And I am closing in on that. So if you are listening in on Apple or Apple Podcasts, please go and rate the show and leave a review if you absolutely love it. And I would be most appreciative. Also, if you would like to receive my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, please be sure to go to teriwellbrock.com. It's Teri, just one R, WELLBROCK.com. And I have a gift to send you for signing up for that monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. Plus, there are many other resources listed on that page, including a resource library. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.